Thank you, Jerry. Hello, friends. Welcome to Jesus and Tim in Las Vegas. I try to get out as many gospel tracts every day to some of the millions that are coming from all over the world to the secret suicide capital of the United States. Suicides are never reported here in Las Vegas unless it's a murder-suicide. Why am I talking about this? Because you need to realize that this is just not a place of just, come here and do whatever you want to do. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Well, they don't report on the suicides, that's for sure. But we want to see people get saved. And, my friend Mike and I are getting into Mexico. The Lord's allowed us to get into 22 cities or towns in Mexico. We got about 7 more to go that we're shooting for. Then Tokyo, and then back to Israel. Lord willing, one more time, our 10th time, handing out gospel tracts. We just want to get the gospel out to as many people as possible, either here or there. But there's no excuse for Christians not taking advantage of the opportunities they have in trying to reach the lost. If you want to hear today's program, my friend Brandon will have it up on Jesus and Tim in Las Vegas on YouTube, and also some of the past programs are on the website, jesusandtim.tk. We're going to have that August newsletter up for you here soon. You can click on newsletter, should have that up in a few days. But I'm so grateful for Brandon's hard work and Brother Dave's wonderful job on that newsletter. I just can't imagine anybody doing a better job than that. Well, Dan Fox and Mitch Nimore and I go out on Fremont Street Experience on Friday nights, and Thursday night we go out and hand out gospel tracts. We were wearing our Jesus Saves from Hell shirt, and somebody's saying, why do you do that? Well, Jesus talked about it. If Jesus talked about it, it's okay for us believers to warn people, isn't it? Don't you think? I mean, if he talked about hell more than anybody else in the Bible, do you think he was trying to tell us something? Especially when he said a servant's not greater than his master. You know, love men or scare men, but get them in. I came in through the fear of hell. I could have cared less that Jesus loved me. I'm motivated by that now. I thought, what if Jesus was telling the truth about an eternal hell, eternal punishment? And I'm sure I'm not the only one. But Dan Fox, how did you come to the Lord? What was it that brought you around? Hello.
Hi, Tim. I just picked up the end of your question, but I think you were asking me about the Lord.
Yeah, I was asking you how you came to the Lord. Was it the love of Jesus or the fear of hell?
Well, a little bit of both, but mostly the fear of hell. Being told by an evangelist that problem deep inside of me that I always knew was there had a name that's called sin, and I'm headed to hell, but the good news is there's a Savior who died to pay the price.
Amen.
And in tears, I raised my hand and prayed with him to get saved.
Amen. Amen. Last night, Dan, Mitch, and I were on Fremont Street handing out the new Chick track, Who's It Gonna Be? It's an awesome track. You can read it at chick.com. And what's your take on the track, Dan?
Well, if you remember, I gave my last one to the lady at the booth, so I haven't read it yet.
Okay.
But I'll log in later.
All
From
right.
what I've heard from you and Mitch, it's excellent, and I know there was one of the best responses I've seen on Fremont Street as far as folks taking the track from us, so that was a good blessing.
Very good response. Now, Thursday night, Dinesh D'Souza's new movie came out, Death of a Nation, and you and I saw that. There were only 7 people in the theater with us, and that could have had to do something with the theater that we were supposed to see it at. Well, tell us about that and give us your take on the movie.
Yeah, it was actually a pre-opening preview, and I'm hearing really good things about how it's doing. It actually opened yesterday in 1,000 theaters, so that's good news. And wow, it just blew me away on 2 levels. One, Dinesh does such a good job of being very accurate, insightful, a great documentarian with historical facts and things you didn't know. But it's entertaining. It moves along. The graphics are great. The actors he had playing different roles, including Hitler, did a great job. And good movie. I give it 2 thumbs up. And a movie like this, as you know, we just have to support. There's so much, a tidal wave. My family and I were talking about, you can't watch these superhero TV shows with your kids anymore. They're full of junk.
Right.
But a movie like this, it is just so good, godly, very Christian, accurate, and well done, needs to be supported. We need to send a message to Hollywood and Washington, D.C. of what a movie could really do.
Absolutely. I saw I Can Only Imagine 4 times. I wanted to support it. I saw it with different friends who needed to see it. And I'm going to be seeing this with a couple of friends on Tuesday night again. And we really do need to get behind and support these movies. What was your take on it? Give us a little.
Well, I'm familiar with a lot of the basic content of the movie, but the degree to which some of this stuff occurred, and I think anyone who goes to see this is going to learn new things. The fact that the Nazis, the communists, and the progressive Democrats in our country were all in league. Hitler was friends with Margaret Sanger. Mussolini was writing
Let's mention letters. Margaret Sanger was the founder of Planned Parenthood.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yep. And Mussolini was writing support letters to FDR because of the progressive moves he was making to change America towards socialism. I think one of the most dramatic things, and not to be a spoiler, but the fact that the Nuremberg Convention, which was set about to create the Nazi, constitution, so to speak, to establish this new form of government with Hitler as the leader. They sat around a table, and their model for how to discriminate against the Jews in law were the laws of the Southern Democrats. And they said, it's an amazing part of the movie, their doctrine of one drop of blood, meaning one drop of black blood, is a little too strong even for us. So the Southern Democrats' racism surpassed even the Nazis when it came to that. Just some eye-opening things, but it's done very compelling and moves along.
Yeah, and see it more than once, folks. Get behind this, and really, this will encourage other filmmakers to step out as well.
Yeah,
but
and investors, that's worth the money to put your money where people are really going to support it and do well.
Yeah.
One thing, this movie deals with very dark, serious historical matters, but it is an upbeat movie. You walk out of that theater literally singing the Hymn of the Republic,
Battle Hymn of the Republic,
and applauding your hands. It's dealing with dark issues, but it does it in a way, especially by the end, where you're just hurrahing.
You've never heard Battle Hymn of the Republic sung any better than the choir that sings it at the end. It just is awesome.
Yeah, I'm getting chills right now just thinking of it.
Amen. Well, Dan Fox, thank you so much, brother, and I look forward to tracking with you on Friday night, next Friday night, Lord willing, and be with you on Monday night at jail, Lord willing.
Yes, amen. That's always a great blessing helping those guys.
Amen. Thanks, Dan. God bless you. Love you too, brother. God bless you. Bye-bye. Thank you, Dan. Dan Fox, a real soul winner. Well, I want to read for you today something that the Berean Call put out, thebereancall.org. Dave Hunt wrote this back in, it was first published in June of 2005, and it will really help you understand what's going on in the Middle East, and then he ties it all into Bible prophecy. It's entitled Judgment Day Approaching. Israel is the major topic of the Bible. The word Israel occurs 2,565 times in 2,293 verses. More than enough prophecies have already been fulfilled in Israel's unique history to prove that the God of Israel, quote unquote, 203 times is the true God. In Zechariah 12:2 and 3, he declares, "Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in the siege, both against Judah and against Jerusalem. And in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it." That's Zechariah 12:2 and 3. This is an amazing prophecy, not only that Jerusalem, which was then in ruins, would become a burden to the whole world, but that all of Israel's neighbors would be united against her. They have fought one another in the past, yet today, for the first time in history, quote, all the people round about, end quote, are united by Islam to destroy Israel. For more than 60 years, Israel's neighbors have launched surprise attacks against her, and she's proved too strong militarily, even though they outnumber her 40-1. God said, quote, I will make Judah like a hearth of fire among the wood, and they shall devour all the people round about, Zechariah 12:6. Soundly defeated every time, her Muslim neighbors feign a desire for peace, hoping to deceive and ultimately destroy her, a strategy established by Muhammad. The real battle is not between Arabs and Jews, but between Allah and Yahweh. There is no question of the outcome, for it will be costly for both sides. Israel will be severely punished for rebellion, and her enemies will be destroyed. Exactly as foretold, Jerusalem is a burden to all people of the world. More than 60,000 individual votes have been cast in the UN against Israel. Let me read that again. More than 60,000 individual votes have been cast in the UN against Israel. This tiny nation, with 1/1000th of the world's population, has occupied 1/3 of the United Nations' time. A burden indeed. Skeptics accuse Christians of trying to fit current events to the Bible, claiming that no one recognized such prophecies until Israel was formed in 1948. On the contrary, for centuries, most evangelical Christians have preached from the Bible the return of the Jews to their own land. Even John Owen, a leading Calvinist, wrote in the 17th century, quote, the Jews will be gathered into their homeland, end quote. This was also the opinion of the poet John Milton, of John Bunyan, Roger Williams, Oliver Cromwell, and many others. Martin Luther wrote, quote, if the Jews are Abraham's descendants, they should be back in their own land with a state of their own, but they are scattered and despised, end quote, as God's chosen people, and persecuted them. But today the Jews are back in their own land after 2,500 years of being scattered worldwide, speaking Hebrew just as King David did 3,000 years ago. No other people have returned to reestablish their own nation and language after being cast out of their land for such a period of time. Some prophecies applicable only to our day are frightening, foretelling God's judgment. The language is often graphic. Deuteronomy 32:41 and 42, if I whet my glittering sword, and my hand take hold on judgment, I will render vengeance to mine enemies. My sword shall devour flesh. That's Deuteronomy 32:41 and 42. And then there's Isaiah 66:15 and 16, for behold, the Lord will come to render his anger with fury by his sword. Isaiah 66:15 and 16. And then there's Jeremiah 25:33. And the slain of the Lord shall be at that day from one end of the earth to the other. They shall not be lamented, neither gathered nor buried. Jeremiah 25:33. The question is often asked as to whether the United States or Canada or Australia is in Bible prophecy. Of course. Scripture declares that every nation in the world will join together to invade Israel in the last days and be destroyed in the battle of Armageddon. Zechariah 12:9 and 14:2 through 4 says, I will gather all nations, surely all includes America, against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken. Then the Lord shall go forth and fight against those nations. But wouldn't the United States be spared for being Israel's friend? In fact, the United States State Department has often been against Israel. This was true in the Yom Kippur War. In a sneak attack, October 1973, 80,000 Egyptians overwhelmed 500 Israeli defenders along the Suez, and 1,400 Syrian tanks swept down the Golan, with only one Israeli tank brigade in service to oppose them. Israel was taken by surprise. Most of her armed forces were on holiday. The initial success of the attackers so electrified the Arab world that 9 other Arab states rushed in to get in on the slaughter. Historian David Rarsh writes, quote, Jordan's King Hussein sent 2 of his best armored brigades to Syria. Saudi Arabia and Kuwait financially underwrote the huge cost while sending thousands of troops to fight the Israelis. Kuwait lent her British-made Lightning jets to Egypt. Libya's Muammar Gaddafi turned over 40 French-made Mirage 3 fighters and 100 tanks. Iraqi MiG fighter jets, as well as tank and infantry divisions, fought on the Golan Heights, while a squadron of Iraqi Hunter jets were utilized by Egypt. Arabs predicted the extermination of the Jewish state and the liberation of Palestine, quote unquote. The Soviet Union blocked any UN attempt at a ceasefire and refortified the Arab forces with armaments and supplies by sea and air. It was the closest Israel ever came to being defeated. But when the war ended, the Israeli tank columns were on the outskirts of Damascus and Cairo and could have taken those cities had they not turned back. Tragically, Israel suffered about 3,000 dead, which would be comparable to the U.S. losing 150,000. Except for a series of miracles from God, Israel would not have survived. Where was her friend the United States? Dozens of notices were sent to the Nixon White House by America's National Security Administration that an Arab Pearl Harbor was about to be launched against Israel. Nixon sat on them. Kissinger hid at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York the day of the attack and waited another 3 days before convening the UN Security Council. Declining to rush desperately needed military supplies to Israel, the White House said it had to be careful not to upset the Arabs and cause an oil crisis. 6 years earlier, on June 8, 1967, the fourth morning of the Six-Day War, quote-unquote, the USS Liberty, an electronics eavesdropping vessel, arrived off the Sinai coast and began to suck in every Israeli military communication, relaying it all to the British Secret Service's giant computer installation on Cyprus. From there, complete maps of every Israeli military move were transmitted in advance to the Arab armed forces. With that help, the Arabs might have been able to use their overwhelming numerical superiority to turn the tide of the war. Israel had no choice except to sink the Liberty. Of course, the media screamed about this, quote, cold-blooded attack, end quote. No one believed Israel's public excuse that the Liberty had been mistaken for a hostile Egyptian ship, and neither the U.S. nor Israel has publicly told the truth. Yes, the United States, too, will attack Israel and will be punished at Armageddon. God declares plainly that he will bring all nations against Israel to destroy them. Ezekiel 38:16-23, in the latter days I will bring thee against my land. My fury shall come up in my face. There shall be a great shaking in the land of Israel. The fishes of the sea and the fowls of the heaven, and the beasts of the field, and all creeping things in the earth, and all the men on the face of the earth shall shake at my presence. All nations shall know that I am the Lord. Ezekiel 38:16-23. This is terrifying language. What causes this great shaking, quote-unquote, of the entire planet and every living creature on it? God is personally coming to earth as he did at Mount Sinai when he gave the law, and he's going to take vengeance upon the enemies of Israel. There are two specific reasons for God's judgment. Quote, I will gather all nations into the valley of Jehoshaphat between Jerusalem and the Mount of Olives, where God miraculously destroyed invading nations without Israel lifting a finger, 2 Chronicles 21:10-25, and will plead with, punish them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom I have scattered among the nations and parted my land, Joel 3:2. Of course, all nations have participated in persecuting and scattering the Jews from country to country for 2,500 years. The second reason for God's judgment falling on all nations, however, is something that has only occurred within our generation. They have divided my land, quote unquote. Israel has been overrun by invaders many times, but never did any conqueror divide the land. The victor does not share its spoils with others. Since World War I, however, all nations have joined to divide the land of Israel. The 1917 Balfour Declaration, the 1919 Paris Peace Conference, and the 1922 Declaration of Principles by the League of Nations all recognized that the land that had become known as Palestine, quote unquote, since the Romans renamed Israel in AD 135, belonged to the Jews. It was set aside to become the national homeland of the Jewish people, quote, internationally guaranteed and formally recognized to rest upon ancient historical connection, end quote. Of course, history ties Israel to all of Palestine, quote unquote. Britain was given the mandate to see that the Jews were safely settled there. The discovery of huge reservoirs of oil under Arab lands caused Britain to keep Jewish immigrants out and let in tens of thousands of Arabs. Just when millions of Jews desperately needed a haven to which they could flee from Nazi Germany, Britain's 1939 White Paper limited Jewish immigrants to 10,000 per year for a maximum of 5 years, plus an additional 25,000 refugees, quote unquote, during that period. Then the door to Palestine would be shut entirely to the Jews. Since the Nazis had marked for extinction 11 million Jews in Europe, the quota of 25,000 defied God and conscience. A year earlier, President Roosevelt had gathered delegates from 32 countries in Yverdon, France, to discuss the worsening plight of the Jews. Roosevelt made it clear that the United States would do nothing. Britain said there was no room in Palestine and it was not to be discussed, professing their great sympathy for Europe's Jews that everyone knew were to be exterminated. The nations offered various excuses why they could do nothing to intervene. Hitler shrewdly declared, quote, "We are ready to put all these criminals at the disposal of these countries, even on luxury ships," end quote. When the conference ended with the Jews completely abandoned, Hitler mocked the participants, quote, "It was recently regarded as wholly incomprehensible why Germany did not wish to preserve in its population the Jews, yet these countries seem in no way anxious to receive them now that the opportunity offers," end quote. The entire world was Hitler's partner in destroying the Jews. In 1944, Hitler offered to sell to the Allies 500,000 Hungarian Jews for $2 each, and no one would take them. Egypt said there was no room, quote unquote, in Palestine. And England, said there was no room, quote unquote, in Palestine for them. In 1943, Britain and America had agreed to say and do nothing about the Holocaust, fearful that if pressed, Hitler would dump the Jews on its critics. The Allies steadfastly refused to repeat urgent appeals from Jewish organizations to bomb the rail lines going in and out of the extermination camps. God will judge all nations. After the war, a trickle of emaciated survivors of Hitler's death machines sought to reach Palestine, quote unquote, in half-sinking ships. Some who got within sight of the land God had given to them as an everlasting inheritance, 1 Chronicles 16:15 through 18, were driven back by the British Navy and put into internment camps on Cyprus. Many who did manage to find shelter within what would become the new Jewish state of Israel were rounded up by the British and removed to those camps. Britain created Jordan out of most of the Promised Land. The demise of the British Empire, upon which the sun never sank, quote unquote, can be counted from the time Britain betrayed the Jews. One more fulfillment of the prophecy: "I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee." That's Genesis 12:3. Now, there's about 3 more paragraphs, but you'll have to read that on your own when you go to the BereanCall.org and ask for the July 2018 newsletter, Judgment Day Approaching. It's something you need to share with your friends, your children, because you're not going to get this from the news media. And you're not going to get what Dinesh D'Souza is putting out in that movie, Death of a Nation, which is showing in your theaters now. Thank you so much for your support. Tim Barron's, if you'd like to help out with this trip coming up, Tim Barron's, Post Office Box 24091, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89101. Thank you so much for tuning in, and you can hear the program. My friend Brandon will have it up on Jesus and Tim in Las Vegas on YouTube, and you can go to the website as well, jesusandtim.tk. Thank you so much for your prayers, your support, and we'll be back, Lord willing, next week. Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, for as much as you know that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. 1 Corinthians 15:58, something to remember. God bless you, my friend. Bye-bye.
Give me oil in my lamp, keep me burning. Give me oil in my lamp, I pray, hallelujah. Give me oil in my lamp, keep me burning. for the Lord. Give me gas for my Ford, I pray. Hallelujah. Give me gas for my Ford. Keep me trucking for the Lord.